I'll just open it up to discussion. Yeah, Dave.
Thanks for that, Tony. It was very good. Yeah, I just want to ask a question. I've been, the situation, the conflict has been in the news for since I was a child. I've grown up. I mean, we've all grown up with that in a way, but it's why I just want to ask a question. Why has this only come to the fore now? It's quite obviously an apartheid situation in Israel, but why has this only become to the fore now? And why did the PLO why did they not promote this as an apartheid situation? What has changed, in that respect?
Okay. Do you want me to answer now, or do you want me to wait for any other further comments or questions?
You can come back now, or you can wait for. Well, I think you can come back directly to Dave's question. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, why now? I mean, there's no simple or easy explanation for why now. I think you have to see it in terms of the progress of the Zionist experiment. Israel is engaged in ongoing colonization internally. That is within the 48 borders or boundaries and the 67 boundaries. And there's, in those who advocate two states, and I have never supported two states, see a demarcation between the Israel up to 67 and Israel post 67. But this is a misnomer and a myth. There is one greater Israeli state. And there's been, as we know, ongoing colonization in the West Bank. I mean, about a third, 40% of the land has been stolen by various legal devices from the indigenous population. But there has also been an internal colonization. In 1976, in protest against the theft of Arab land, and remember that in Palestine, I mean, the Jewish National Fund in Israel controls or owns 93% of the land. There's very little private ownership of land in Israel. The Palestinians are confined to about 2.5%. The rest is just private Jewish land, or mainly city areas and so on. And because there was an ongoing confiscation of land, the Palestinians rose up, and 6 of them were murdered by the police. Bear in mind that of all the demonstrations in Israel since its foundation, only one, I'm told this by Moshe Machova, I believe, because I couldn't find any examples, but he tells me one Jewish demonstrator was shot dead by the police. Compare that to the literally dozens, if not hundreds, within Israel itself, of Palestinians who've been shot. So there's been an ongoing process of confiscation of Arab land, the little that's left, even within Israel, and in particular in, say, for example, the Negev, where the Bedouin live. It's an arid semi-desert area. It's not heavily populated. The capital is Beersheba, and a couple of years ago, the Bedouin village of El Haran was demolished. It was an unrecognized village. You have this situation in Palestine where half of the Arab villages in Israel itself are not recognized. They're considered squatters. So they have no facilities, no running water, no electricity, no basic utilities, no garbage collection, no voting booths when it comes to elections, and so on. And the Israeli state decided that they want to corral the Bedouin in kind of townships, very much like South Africa did, and to build a Jewish city, an Orthodox Jewish city, Hiran. And the Palestinians, the Bedouins, said, well, why don't you build it next to us? We have no particular objection. The area's wild and it's not heavily populated. But no, this was unacceptable. The Zionists wished to build it literally on top of the Palestinian village. And in the process, one person was killed, shot dead, a teacher, school teacher, by the Israeli police. And this has become a cause célèbre because of the way they tried to cover it up. And there was quite a lot of forensic evidence and also investigations by neutral third parties, which showed that the police had shot this person who was driving a car at the time. And as a result of this, the car careered out of control and killed a policeman, ironically. But this process had been going on in the Negev. The confiscation and the eviction of Palestinians who've lived there since 1956 or 1948. The same process, as I mentioned before, has been going on in Jerusalem, the ethnic cleansing of East Jerusalem. The Palestinians there are called permanent residents. Although Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1970, it didn't give the Palestinians their automatic citizenship. They were called permanent residents, but that permanency can be revoked at a moment's notice. For example, Palestinians who leave Jerusalem and emigrate or study abroad for more than 6 or 7 years can have it revoked automatically. Or if they visit the West Bank and it's considered that their centre, their habitual residence, in a sense, it's a legal term you'd use in England, their centre of life is not in Jerusalem. Again, they can have their residence revoked. Or if they marry someone from the West Bank, they're not allowed to bring their fiancé to Jerusalem, so they must move out, in which case they're likely to have their residence revoked. Something like, I think, 14, 15,000 East Jerusalem might have. And the plan is quite clear. I mean, it is drawn up in master plans for the Jerusalem area, that they want an overwhelming Jewish majority, and it's spearheaded by the settlers, settlers from the West Bank. This process is also...
20, yeah, I've just had another indication, Tony, so I'm going to give...
Okay, fine.
Yeah. John?
I was just going to say that this process is also ongoing in what's called the mixed Arab-Jewish cities, like Lod, Haifa, Acre, and so on, whereby Jewish settlers are trying to move into the Arab areas and displace the indigenous population again, with the aim of creating pure Jewish cities. So why has it happened now? I mean, the focal point has clearly been not only Sheikh Jarrah, but the Mosque of Al-Aqsa, because the desire of these settlers, these religious messianic settlers who use God as their sword, is to create a third temple on the Temple Mount, and in the process destroy and demolish Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Golden Dome. And clearly that would set an explosion right across the region, which is why even the Israeli government is wary about the people behind it. But
yeah, I'm just going to, just want to allow more people to get in. John?
Sure, yes, sorry.
You'll need that on mute. On mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to comment on this why now thing. And what it is, we're talking about the internal dynamics of the Israeli state, but the Israeli state exists in a context, and the context is the absolute support of the imperialism in general and the US in particular. And also, as the Arab regimes move further to the right, the collaboration of the Arab regimes also. And so it was the US, not Israel, it was US who needed the two-state solution. So they could excuse every individual step that the Israelis took, but say, look, here's the two-state solution. All you've got to do is reach out, be peaceful, reach out, and we'll have a two-state solution. And what happened then is that Trump made it absolutely clear he had no interest in a two-state solution, didn't know what it was. He was a friend of Israel and moving the consulate to Jerusalem. And he and Kushner then dreamt up this real estate deal that they called the Gabriel Accords. And in the process, that emboldened the Israelis themselves, who saying, we now have carte blanche, we can do anything we like. And, so all these movements took on a new intensity. All the drives against the Palestinian population took on a new intensity and led to the latest conflict. So what's happening now is that the Americans are now trying to resurrect the two-state solution, and they're also trying to resurrect the Palestinian Authority, which is, as far as I can see, on its last legs, because it's so ineffective in relation to the Israeli government and so willing to collaborate. So I think Tony has touched on this with the sections of the Progressive Democratic Party starting to protest, with people in the Black Lives Matter movement and people of colour sort of starting to protest, and above all, with young Jews starting to say, no, we don't want to be part of the Zionist movement. But those are all automatic processes. And I think what's really weak at the minute is the solidarity movement. Because you can have a protest, you can go home, but the only thing I see deployed at the minute is BDS, and I don't see any broader remobilization of the left, any broader attempts to put the squeeze on both the so-called left in the West and also on the Western government.
Right.
Am I supposed to reply now, or
No, I'll see if anyone else wants to come in. So anyone who has a camera can indicate with their hand, and anyone who's off camera just use the raise hand icon in Zoom. Yeah, I've got an indication from Chris.
Hi, Tony.
Yeah.
Kind of leading on from, or taking into account what John said there, I wanted to ask you about the demonstrations that took place in Britain. There's some very impressive turnouts, 200,000, I think, or something like that, in London. So I was wondering what impact that had on the campaign that lasted for over 5 years, attacking people in the Labour Party of false accusations of anti-Semitism. Did that feed into that turnout in any way? And the other thing that I wanted to ask you was, is there any signs that any movement that might emerge from that would dispense completely with any adherence to the idea of a two-state solution?
Right, thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Anyone else want to come in? Ask a question or make a point?
Can I just
Yeah, Michael.
get a point? Yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks very much for the presentation. Really interesting as usual. And just want to say in relation to what John was saying there earlier, what the solidarity movements being a bit sort of weak. I mean, it's really interesting to see how with all the information that's available and has been available for a long time, the level of political ignorance around this issue has been so profound, certainly in the major parts of the world, well, Western parts of the world. I'm sure there are others too, but certainly in the major metropolitan parts of the world, the ignorance around the Middle East, or the fear of delving too deeply, is quite profound, actually. And I think that is why the solidarity movements are so weak, because especially coming into the 90s and the 2000s, for a variety of reasons, of course. But the fear of being labeled anti-Semitic is one of those I think we can't overlook. And the effectiveness of that anti-racist tendency, which is laudable in one sense, but has been weaponized by a state very effectively in another sense. And the context in which that happens, the historical context, etc., Jewish oppression So that is what we have to really, talk about as well. The way in which this has been really been very effective, and the fear it engenders, backed up by other states, of course, other sources of power, to say, shut up, don't mention. I mean, I know progressive people, including friends of mine, who are otherwise socialists, who wouldn't have too much criticism of Israel as the only Jewish state, and they keep telling me, why pick on the only Jewish state in the world? It's not the worst, etc., etc. What about Saudi Arabia? What about Myanmar? What about, etc.? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Right, thanks. So anyone else want to come in with a point or a question? So I'll just ask the question myself, just going back to the original title of the meeting, is Israel an apartheid state? So we have to go back to what the original apartheid was in Southern Africa. And that was very much based upon the mining industry. You mentioned Cecil Rhodes in your talk, but he was really the pioneer of the mining industry in Southern Africa, and particularly the labor system that existed there, the migrant labor system, which represented complete control over African labor. And that migrant labor system, sort of regulations and sort of organization of it, was very much the economic foundation of racial discrimination in Southern Africa, which was there in the 19th century, was there in the early 20th century under British rule, and was there again, only more sort of formalized in the form of apartheid from 1948 onwards. So it's just that when you said, in your talk, you said that the state of Israel didn't need Arab labor. But if that's the case, then I think the comparison with apartheid falls down, because apartheid, as it's understood, particularly in Southern Africa, it was all about African labor and the control of African labor. So I think we have to sort of define our terms and say, does Israel need Arab labor? How does it control Arab labor, and how important is Arab labor to Israeli capitalism?
Okay, do you want me
Yeah.
to respond?